At this point, you should have your specialty jig table built, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start by cutting out the inner frame for this flatbed. So refer to your blueprint, the cut list for your inner frame, as well as the diagram that is in your blueprint. So if you don't already, you need to pause this video and cut out all your pieces. For that, once you do that, come back, show you the next thing. After you have all your pieces cut, the first thing we're going to do is put our 2-piece A's, which are your longest pieces, on your jig. So as you can see here, I got my 2-piece A's. They're both against my spacers that I had welded on. And the next thing we need to do once we have those piece A's on our table is make sure they're square with each other. So the way you do that is you measure the cross square, which is the outside corner of your tube, to the opposite outside corner of your other tube. And when you do that both directions, your measurement should be the same. If it's not, it means your 2 pieces are out of square and you need to adjust accordingly. So mine are pretty spot on. If they aren't, if they're a little bit off, the easiest way I've found is to clamp one side, and don't fool with that, and then lightly clamp your opposite side and use a hammer to tap it in either direction until you get your cross squares to the same measurement. Once your cross squares are the same, you know that your 2-piece A's are square with each other. I would suggest to take your time on this part because if you take your time and get these square right off the bat, it's going to make the rest of the job a lot easier because everything will be aligned. So once you have your 2-piece A's on your table and square with each other, the next thing we're going to do is add our 2-piece C cross members. At this point, you should have your 2-piece A's on your jig table and they should be square with each other. So mine are square with each other. My cross references, measurements are the same when I go both directions. And once you get these square with each other, you need to clamp them down in 4 positions. So 2 positions on each piece. I got it clamped here, back there, here, and back there. The next thing we're going to do after you got these clamped and they're square with each other is we're going to start adding our piece C's, which are the inner cross members here, and our piece B's, which are the pieces that go out here. So I have drawn my measurements. So you're going to want to reference your cut list and diagram of your inner frame on your blueprint. All of the measurements that you see are in reference to the front of your inner frame. So I'm going to pick this side here as the front of my inner frame and measure all of my measurements in reference to this front edge here. So as you can see, I got actually 2 lines at each measurement. So this tells me that my piece C is going to be 39 inches back from the front. Base whatever your measurement is on the blueprint of whatever model you're doing, but for the example's sake, I'm just going to use this bed I'm building. So this is 39 inches back. I also drew a line 41 inches back on both sides, and that's just because I'm using 2-inch wide tube, so the line is 2 inches apart, so I can line up both edges of my tube with my 2 lines. I'm going to do the same thing for the other measurements. That will become more clear when we start putting this together. So the first thing is we're going to add our piece C's. So you need to mark out where your piece C's are going to be in relationship to the front side of your bed. Once you have your measurements, you're going to need a piece of either flat bar or a small piece of plate that you have laying around your shop, like something like this. And then we're going to clamp this, and it's going to be right underneath where the front piece C is going to be. So I'm going to do both of these. And then I'm going to grab my piece C. And these are basically used as a shelf platform to put your piece C on, and it just makes it flush with the top of your piece A's. And then as I said, I'm going to line up this front edge with my front line and the back edge with my back line. And then I'm going to tack weld both sides. So at this point, we're not going to solid weld anything because it's going to make it too hot and it's going to pull your pieces out of square. So just tack weld everything on the inner frame for now. Once we got our front piece C welded in, we're going to move to the rear piece C. Same thing. Just going to clamp these right underneath my measurements for the piece C that's towards the back. Same deal, I'm going to line the front edge of my tube up with my front line and the rear edge up with my back line on both sides. And we're going to tack weld that as well. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our piece B's to the outside. So I'll show you how to do that next. At this point, you should have your two piece C's tack welded in position. So I have mine here and here. Next, we're going to put in our piece B's. So this is 2" by 2" square tubing. You should have this in your materials pile that we're going to use for part of the bed later. But for now, we're going to use this as a guide. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that our two piece B's that we're going to put in are square with our frame and also at the correct level. So I've measured back according to what my blueprint says to where my first piece B's are going to be towards the front. So I measured back to that point, put a mark, and then clamped this piece down with the front edge of this 2" tube where my mark is for how far back my two piece B's need to be. So once you do that, clamp these down. If you don't have clamps, you can also tack weld it on. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to put these piece B's on. So I'm going to start with this side. Basically, you're going to want to line this up so that your edge of your piece B should be flush with the edge of this tube guide. And then you're also going to want to hold it tight against here. That just ensures that it's level and square, and the top side is at the same level as the rest of your inner frame. So get this all lined up and then tack weld it on both sides. Go ahead and do that for the other side. Again, line up the face of this tube with the face of this tube. Should be a nice flush plane. Hold it tight up against it. Tack weld. Once you have that done, we're going to draw our next measurements for our second row of piece B's and then move this back there and do the same thing. At this point, you should have your two piece C's in and your front two piece B's in. And I've moved my clamps and my guide bar back to where my second row of piece B's are. If you had it tack welded, you're just going to cut it off, move it back, and tack weld it to your next mark that's a reference from the front to the front of your second row of piece B. So that's what I've done back here. I've just moved my clamps and again put the front side of this square tube at the measurement for how far back the second row of piece B's need to be. And we're just going to do the same thing, use it as a guide bar, Make sure your faces are lined up flush. It's tight against the bottom, and tack weld. Go ahead and do that on the other side as well. Again, face flush, tight against the bottom. So after you get those tacked on, your inner frame is built, but you're not going to want to solid weld any of your seams yet. We're going to wait until we build a little bit more of this bed before we come back and solid weld all these seams. So, like I said, your inner frame's complete, and we're ready to move on.